Hi everyone and welcome once again to Geekfest Rants. My name is Carlos Perron and today we have part 2 of our New York Toy Fair 2012 special. As we talked about last week about part 1 of Toy Fair, we concentrated mainly on some of the popular brands that are out there, most of them having to do with Star Wars of course, but one of the big ones that we visited and that we were looking forward to the most was Lego. Now Lego has been around for a very long time, and as far as Star Wars goes, they've been putting out Star Wars toys for quite a bit. Now, what's been happening, and it's nothing unusual, is that a lot of the stuff they put out now, they've already put out in the past, but they kind of re-put it out again. They modify them sometimes. They alter them. Sometimes they look very much the same, but most of the time you do get some improvement on the product. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about today is the 2012 line of Lego Star Wars toys that are coming, which again, it's a continuation. This is an ongoing process because every year they put out more and more of these. Now, granted, when you have a show like the Clone Wars, that gives Lego the opportunity to not have to go, dipping back into the well to redo a certain ship or a certain play set that's already been done before. With Clone Wars, it gives them the opportunity to actually produce something brand new that they've never done before, which is very exciting, I'm sure, for the building team, but also for the fans. They get to actually see a ship or a playset that has not been done before. And it's also exciting because a lot of times, you have your action figure collectors, you have your Lego collectors, and sometimes a ship or a playset might debut first on one than the other. So that's also an interesting little twist. You don't see it on one side until you see it on the other side first. So let's talk about Lego first in terms of Toy Fair. As I explained last time, the layout of Toy Fair is very different depending on what manufacturer you are. Smaller manufacturers have very small booths, let's say. Bigger manufacturers have bigger booths. The Lego booth was pretty big. It was one of these enclosed areas, as I mentioned last time, where you need an appointment to go inside their booth. And granted, the difference between booths, you go from your 6-foot table type of setup, let's say. That's like the minimal space that they give you. And obviously that's for smaller manufacturers, very small manufacturers. You could even say they could be kind of mom and pop type of manufacturers, to the equivalent of, let's say, 10 or 20 of those spaces combined into a big rectangular shape booth that has walls all around and some kind of an entrance in the front. And when you walk around that area, most of them you can't see inside. The walls are too high. Some of them actually have glass windows where you can peek in, or some of them have glass display areas along the perimeter so you could look at some of their toys. But it's mainly put together that way to keep people out so that you can get people in, by appointment type of deals. So what happened was, I was there and I made an appointment while I was there because I was only there on Monday. And something changed on the schedule and I had to ask them, I'm not coming in tomorrow. I'm going to be here only today. Could I switch it for today? They allowed me to switch it for today, being that Monday. So they brought me in to the area, and the way they do it is their salespeople, their representative, their merchandising, marketing people, I don't know what you call them, they bring you into the showroom and they kind of take you into the specific areas you want to be, or they take you everywhere. It's up to you. I specifically was interested in 3 lines that Lego, I knew for a fact, was working with or coming out. One of them being the Star Wars line, obviously. The other one being the Marvel superhero line, because that's a kind of a slightly newer line that they put out. I mean, they've had, superhero type of stuff in the past, but this is a new wave that they've recently started messing around with, with the advent of the success of all these pre-Avenger films that have been coming out, Iron Man, Hulk and stuff like that. And they're folding into this line now the upcoming Avenger film. So they're kind of revving up, and it's, it's a line that's starting to cook right now. It's cooking pretty well. And the third one was one we talked about a while back with James on one of our previous episodes having to do with Lego video games. I'm talking about the Lord of the Ring line, which will, from what I understand, begin as Lord of the Rings and then evolve into The Hobbit. So those were the 3 big ones that I was after. So they bring me in and I walk over to the Star Wars section first, and there we were able to see some new items that we haven't seen before. One of them is the Desert Skiff. Now this is the skiff, basically the transport vehicle from Return of the Jedi in Tatooine that takes Luke to the Sarlacc pit. Now, as I mentioned before, a lot of these have been done before. Desert Skiff's been done before. It's funny because when you compare them, brick by brick, it's pretty much the same design, except they switched some pieces around. They put some new pieces on. So the basic design is the same. It has the skiff, a couple of characters, and a little sarlacc pit, to put on the side. So it's an interesting little set. Then you have Stacy Tin's Jedi Starfighter. This is what you would recognize as your generic Jedi Starfighter design, triangular in shape, all green, because that's, I guess, his color, his particular color. And I'm not sure exactly if the color of the ship goes with the lightsaber or the other way around, or I'm not sure, but this one happens to be all green. Even the droid that comes with his ship is green. They are also putting out another, and I guess this would be the second one, because last year I remember they put one out, a Star Wars Advent Calendar, which is it's a holiday type of design calendar where you open up these little doors and you have all these little characters, mini figures and mini ships and stuff like that. Apparently it was very successful last year. They're putting out a new one this year. And also keep in mind that everything is being branded with the Phantom Menace Darth Maul face, because 2012 is the way we're on. We're on the Phantom Menace 3D re-release, if you will. And all the toys are going to be packaged in that manner. Now, we've already seen a peek, on some of these websites of what will be next year's packaging, because next year, assuming there's a Attack of the Clones 3D film, they're going to have to repackage it in that manner. And from what I understand, it's going to be Yoda. That's going to be the marketing logo for that toy line. But for now, everything that we're seeing now that's being released this year will have the Phantom Menace Darth Maul. Another ship they showed us, which was my favorite from what I've saw as far as the Star Wars line goes, is something called the Republic Strike Class Starfighter. This is from what I understand, an EU-inspired ship. What I mean by EU is, as I mentioned before, there are different places you can go, or Lego can go, for inspiration, if you will, or where to get ideas from. Obviously, the movies is the easiest thing to go to. The Clone Wars, as I mentioned before. Again, a great place to go to because you're dealing with new material that you might be actually the first one to actually put it out, and you don't have to repeat yourself because the Clone Wars material is coming out all the time. It's constantly coming and coming and coming. A third place they're venturing now is the EU. They're actually going into some of the video games. For example, the Old Republic game that came out recently, apparently they are trying to do some tie-ins and create some toys to go along with that line of video game. And this one is a ship and some characters from that game. But this one is a ship that is very reminiscent of the X-Wing. It's got the X-Wing body, long wings, attached projectiles on the sides, but it doesn't appear as if the wings open. The foils don't open up like an X-Wing. They stay put. Now, the reason I'm interested in this ship is because recently in Clone Wars, they had an episode where they deploy these X-Wing looking ships, and the closer I look at them, they look like what would be the predecessor to the X-Wing. And if you do some of the online research, you start to go in that direction, that it looks as if they took the idea from a prototype X-Wing drawings, the original 1976 drawings of what the X-Wing could look like. And it looked pretty much very close to that. So I might pick it up because, I'm into the prototype design, the concept design type of merchandise. So I will consider, when I take a closer look at it, picking it up because it looked really cool. It looked really, really cool. Now, they also had some ships that are already in the stores now, that they're part of this wave, but they were because, Toy Fair took place in February. Some of these things might be in stores. For example, they put out a new TIE Fighter, which we've seen already in the stores. They put out a new X-Wing, traditional X-Wing. Seen it in the store already, but they had them on display there too. They also had on display a Gungan sub. Now, again, this is Phantom Menace. A lot of this is Phantom Menace inspired because this is the Phantom Menace here. The sub looks really cool, really large. The proportions look a little different than the movie or even the Hallmark ornament if you have one. It has a very big front body, but a very short, small tail end part. So I'm not entirely sure if this could be considered the specific one. Now, granted, it comes with Jar Jar, Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon, and it also comes with Queen Amidala. So I'm not sure if it's supposed to be exactly the one from the movie or it's just a generic one and therefore the proportions are off. But that struck me a little weird, is that the proportions don't seem right, unless, of course, it's not supposed to be that one. Another one they had out there was the Sith Fury class Interceptor. Again, this is one of these ships that's inspired from the Old Republic game. Really unusual looking ship, very imperial-ish, odd-shaped wings, TIE fighter-y kind of cockpit, triangular angled fins in the front and in the back. It's definitely new. Again, this is one of those areas where they dip into a different place to try to get the ideas of where to get this stuff from. Now, they also had the Pre-Vizsla Mandalorian Fighter. This is from Clone Wars, obviously. Comes with a couple of little characters. Pre-Vizsla, obviously another Mandalorian, and I think it comes with Obi-Wan. And it's a really cool design for a ship. I would have to watch the episode again to get a really closer look at it. I'm not entirely sure if it's ever been put out yet in action figure size or an action figure mode from the Hasbro side. But what's cool about this ship is that you have basically the cockpit design in the middle and wings on the side. What's cool about it is that the wings, from what I see here, rotate around the cockpit, similar to an earlier Jedi Starfighter that I had purchased. Not only do they rotate, which I love that feature on a ship design, but when the ship lands, the wings kind of tilt up so that the wings don't rest on the floor. They stand up straight up, upright, and the cockpit part comes down on the ground. Again, very interesting design. Not entirely sure if I will pick it up. I love the design, but it doesn't exactly, I think, fit my criteria of the weird collecting niche that I go after. They also had a very large, and this is, I guess, one of their bigger flagship, if you will, toys. It's the Malevolence, again, from Clone Wars. This is Grievous's ship, a very large ship. You can open it up, comes with quite a number of little figures. Again, this is the big one. This is the one that has, the most parts. It's the most expensive. It comes to probably around $120 a pop. And the other large set for Lego this year, as far as Star Wars goes, is Jabba's Palace, which, as I said before, they've done this in the past, but this one is completely redone. They rearranged a lot of stuff. They added a lot of stuff. It almost looks nothing like the original. And this is something they're very excited about. Again, $120. A lot of characters come with it. Some characters you haven't seen before. Completely new sculpted Jabba character with some actual mobility to him. What's interesting about Jabba's Palace is that this is a big one, and this is something that a lot of people are excited about. And a lot of these come with figures, they're little Lego men that are exclusively made for those sets. So in other words, you might buy a set that comes with 3 or 4 or 5 figures. And some of those figures might have shown up before on previous toy batches, but they'll throw in a new one or 2 new ones and stuff like that. And from what I've heard once is that the deal that they worked out was that the obvious thing collectors say to themselves, well, why can't they just sell us those figures? Why can't you just go to the store and buy the individual figures one at a time? From what I understand, the deal that was worked out was that Hasbro, whoever is in charge of the action figure line, they get dibs at figures. And for Lego, they didn't want to have Lego competing with Hasbro as far as individual characters. So the deal that was worked out, I guess with the marketing and the merchandising people, is that Lego would only have figures as part of a set, so that you don't have a one-on-one competition for individual characters. Therefore, that's how come you don't see individual figures usually sold in toy stores, in Lego stores or regular toy stores. What ends up happening is, and this is, it's sad, it's expensive, but, a lot of people end up buying these sets. Not so much for the play sets or the ship, but for the figures. A lot of this is, look, they're actually releasing so-and-so, and this is the only place you can get it is with this set. So it does drive people a little crazy in terms of you're paying a lot of money for, if you like a certain character and you want that character, you are going to pay the price of the ship and or set for one single character. That's why the aftermarket, the eBays and stuff like that, for characters, the price goes all over the place. It's pretty nutty. Now, they also had these individual smaller sets, 3 or 4 figures in some small kind of rig or playset or ship. But most of these were already in stores, so it's no big deal. They have the Droid Escape, which is from Star Wars, the escape pod from New Hope. Some of these sets, like I said before, they're already out there, so it's not that big of a deal. They did introduce this new line, which are basically a mini figure, a mini ship, and they come in a bowl-shaped plastic container resembling a planet or the Death Star or something like that. And they already put out a few of them, and they had on display some new ones that they were introducing into this year. Twin Pod Car and Bespin and an X-Wing and Yavin 4, an AT-ST and Endor. And again, the point of this particular line is that you can take the figure, you can take the ship, disassemble them, put them in the ball, close the ball, and they're portable. You can take them along with you. Not something I'm crazy about, but for individual collectors, this is great. It's a great way of getting these minifigures and getting these mini rigs, the actual ships. Then we moved on to the Marvel superhero line. As I mentioned before, it's not a new line. They've done similar stuff to this in the past. I believe they've done it with Batman. They ventured into Batman territory. Different type of line, but it is still, comic book inspired. And recently, they've started putting out specific Marvel themed stuff. They had a whole bunch of Batman stuff, Catwoman, Superman, all kinds of characters like that with, build as Lego sets. So building on that line, what's coming up now is more of those. And like I said before, the Avenger line. There's an Avenger subline, if you will, but it all falls under the Marvel superhero umbrella. Some of the things they showed us there was the Captain America's Avenging Cycle, which is basically a Captain America minifig with a motorcycle for him. This is one of the smaller sets, if you will. But still, it's coming in the summer. Not a lot of promotion about it right now, but it is sold under the Avenger banner. Then you have Wolverine's Chopper Showdown. This is basically Wolverine and a helicopter being piloted by, I think, Deadpool and a Magneto character. So you can put together those. Then you have Loki's Cosmic Cube Escape, which is the character Loki on some kind of an SUV-looking car and an Iron Man figure that is kind of chasing him. And I think you'll also get a Hawkeye figure. This is all definitely Avenger stuff because a lot of these things, they didn't even have boxes for. They would just show you the toys and, you couldn't even see what the box looked like. But at least, the toys is what's important. Next up, higher price range, what you would call the mid-range, you have the Hulk's Carrier Breakout. Now, this is definitely something out of the Avengers. You have a small jet that looks like it's being piloted by Hawkeye. You have a setup, like an interior setup with Thor, Loki, and a Lego Hulk, which is, in proportion to all these other characters. That looked really cool. Like I said before, this is about a $50 set, so it's in the mid-range. And all this action, I believe, is supposed to take place inside the helicarrier, which is from the Avengers film coming up. And finally, the larger or the big set for that line is the Quinjet Aerial Battle. This is basically a large jet-looking vehicle, definitely Avenger-themed, and it comes with a couple of figures. I think you get a Thor, a Black Widow, and an Iron Man. But the big thing about this particular set is the actual plane you have to build. It's a pretty large plane, and it is approximately $70. So that's the big, expensive item from that particular line. Finally, the last line that we got to see was the Lord of the Rings line. Now, this is a great line from what I've seen because they've never done it before. This is the first time they touch any Lord of the Ring related stuff. In the past, they've had, Viking-looking stuff and Dark Ages theme, stuff. But this is exclusively Lord of the Rings material, which means they had to do all these from scratch, which is great. When they introduce product that you've never seen before, it's really good. Now, what's neat is that they tap into all three films to give you different settings, and hopefully this is just the beginning of it. They have 7 sets. The first one, and I'm going to go in the kind of order of how expensive these things are. First one up is Gandalf Arrives, and that's Frodo and a Gandalf figure, and Gandalf, he's riding a carriage and a horse, like in the beginning of Fellowship of the Ring. Then you have the next one up, which is about a $20 range, is Shelob's Attack. This is a giant spider that attacks Frodo and encases him in a cocoon. This set also comes with Sam and Gollum, kind of peeking from a distance. The greatest thing about this set is the faces. The Frodo face is a specially made face that has him, he has his big white eyes and his mouth is wide open as if he's in panic mode. And this is something that you don't see a lot in Lego figures. You don't see too much expression on these characters. But especially for this movie, for this line, there's a lot of expression. And that's really cool. That looks really neat. Then you have the Uruk-hai army, which it looks like to be some Uruk-hai creatures being assembled in front of a castle type of structure and preparing for a battle between the two. There's weapons, there's what appears to be men in armor, and some Uruk-hai characters here or there. This is more of that mid-range. You go up another notch, you have the Orc Forge. I think it's from the first film, where the orcs are made, that underground factory-looking setting where the orcs are being hatched, pretty much. This is a $39 price range. So, like I said before, we are moving up on the price scale. Then you have Attack on Weathertop. This one comes with, I believe, Aragorn, Frodo, Merry, and 2 ring wraiths. So this is that scene in the film where they kind of go to this ruined fortress area and the ring wraiths are getting ready to attack them and they're kind of climbing higher and higher. That's the scene that's being recreated here. This one's about $60. Then you have the Mines of Moria, which is an amazing sequence in the film. This particular one comes with Pippin, Boromir, Gimli, Legolas, and 2 Moria orcs. Plus, it comes with a giant cave troll from the scene, if you remember the scene where they're all fighting. This is that internal scene in the mines where it's almost like an underground fortress. This is a big one. This is at about an $80 price point, so you're dealing with a more expensive set, but it looks awesome, how well it's made. And finally, the biggest one of all for this particular line is the Battle of Helm's Deep. Now, this one comes with a big fortress castle, front, and all the characters that are fighting all over that area. On top, on the sides, in front of it, behind it, through it. This one comes with Aragorn, Gimli, Haldir, King Theoden, the Berserker Uruk-hai, and 3 regular Uruk-hais. And like I said before, this is the one that is going to cost you the most money. This is $130. Now, while I was there, one of the things that the representative there pointed out, that this is the first time that they have horses that have been sculpted where you can actually articulate the horse. Normally horses, I believe, in Legos, they're standard non-articulated figures. Here, because of Lord of the Rings, they moved on and developed the horse a little better so you can actually play with it a little more and pose them in different fashions. So any of the sets that come with horses, they are posable. Now, they didn't have any sampled or prototypes for The Hobbit. They had posters about The Hobbit, and that's what's next. These are all like summer items, but when they get around for The Hobbit, which is a winter film, they're going to start probably putting out, from what I understand, the products for The Hobbit in the fall. So you're looking at September, October, we'll start to see some pictures of Hobbit Legos. Well, this wraps things up today for part 2 of our Toy Fair 2012 special. Please join us again next week where we will be discussing Hasbro. So on behalf of everyone here at Geekfest Rants, thanks for listening and see you next week. Bye-bye.
Stop.